Lindsay Baker awoke before her alarm clock sounded on a chilly February morning. The time on the digital clock was 5:30 a.m. The streets of Brooklyn Heights were silent under the calm, black sky. Lindsay rose silently and pulled back the drapes. The early mist obscured the Manhattan skyscrapers that loomed outside the window. She walked up to the vanity and saw a silver-framed family portrait. It was taken at her parents' place around Christmas last year. Her sister, Candace Wagner, was standing in the middle, their parents watching with pride. Lindsay was standing at the edge, grinning modestly as usual. Lindsay had grown up seeing how hard her parents worked. Her mother balanced a part-time job at a supermarket with parenting their two girls, while her father worked in the accounting division of a medium-sized business. Although they were never affluent, the family was generally content until Candace started making money as an investment analyst. Their parents were enthralled by her sister's glitzy profession and lavish salary, and over time, the dynamics of the family started to change. Candace's famous lifestyle captured their attention more than Lynn's everyday existence. Her father used to exclaim, "Candace is our pride." Whenever the family got together on the weekends, he spoke enthusiastically of his daughter's accomplishments despite having weary eyes from his work in accounting. Her mother also developed the regular practice of discussing Candace with friends during her breaks from working at the grocery store checkout. One of the most watched young professionals on Wall Street, Candace had established herself as a brilliant investment analyst. Her parents watched with unbridled joy as she appeared on television shows and advertised in publications. As usual, Candace was the main topic of conversation during yesterday's family supper. "You received a nomination for Analyst of the Year," her mother replied, her eyes glistening. "We're really proud of you." Lindy's consistent efforts, meanwhile, hardly ever entered the discussions. She had worked hard, developed a profession at a legal firm, and finished first in her class from law school. But her parents appeared hardly to notice her achievements. "Let's give it our all today," she said to herself as she looked in the mirror. She developed this habit when she and her husband, Michael, moved out. Due to his frequent job trips overseas, Lindsay was largely left to raise their kid alone. Particularly today, when she had a crucial appointment with a customer, these words of support had become indispensable. The sight of the rose and thyme seedlings beside the window, as she made her way to the living room, gave her a little respite from her hectic days. "Aaron, Mommy, good morning," as he rubbed his drowsy eyes in his jammies. Lindsay kissed her son's silky hair and gave him a hug. "Aaron, good morning. Today, you're up early." Lindsay pondered the evening as she prepared toast and poured orange juice in the kitchen. Michael was scheduled to return later tonight after a business trip to China that began last week. Since she was going to be late reviewing a crucial contract, she intended to take advantage of the extended childcare hours. "You'll need to spend a little more time at daycare today, Aaron. Is that acceptable?" "Yes." The teacher's stories are usually entertaining, her kid said, and his eyes brightened. "That's excellent. When Mommy finishes her work, she will come get you." Lindsay got Aaron ready and dropped him off at daycare before leaving for her Manhattan workplace. She noticed a message from Michael on her phone. "The Beijing meeting is taking a long time. I will very certainly return tomorrow morning. For me, say hi to Aaron." Many of her coworkers had already begun their day when she arrived at the office. The day appeared to be rather hectic. By now, her sister might be on a morning TV show. Lindsay sighed loudly and looked down at the signed contract. The start of another long day. She told herself that although she might not be the ideal mother or the glitzy professional lady, she had to make the most of her abilities. That was her lifestyle. Lindsay's desk phone rang at 2:00 p.m. It came from the daycare. "We regret to notify you, Miss Baker, that there has been an influenza epidemic in the facility. The extended care for today must be canceled." Lindsay let out a gasp. She couldn't go early since she had a crucial contract to evaluate in its final form today. "Understood," she said, hanging up and reaching for her phone right away. She attempted to get in touch with Patty, her regular babysitter, but she was also suffering from a cold. It appeared that Michael was in Beijing on business and her parents were in the country for a friend's wedding. Lindsay was unable to turn down her senior partner's crucial assignment at this late hour. Her cell phone rang at that very moment. It came from Candace. "Hi, Lindsay, our parents told me. You seem to be going through a difficult period." "Yes, but I'll manage somehow." Candace said, "I can look after your son for you," in a cheerful and kind tone. "That's kind of you, Candace, but today is the Analyst of the Year awards ceremony tonight. But until then, I'm completely free. What about after that?" "My maid Deanne will be there, so don't worry. She has worked with kids before. She once took care of a high-ranking executive's children at an investment firm." Lindsay thought for a while. She was still a true sister to Candace, even if their connection had never been particularly warm. She had also heard wonderful things about her sister's housekeeper, and most importantly, she had nowhere else to go. "Are you sure it's okay?" "Obviously. After all, I'm looking after my dear nephew." Deanne agreed when I spoke with her earlier. Lindsay slowly replied, looking at the calendar, "All right, I get it. But if something goes wrong, get in touch with me right away. Give it to me. Even some of his favorite munchies will be purchased by me." Lindsay's heart ached a little even after she hung up. But if her own sister was babysitting him with a maid accompanying her, maybe it was even safer than long-term childcare. She told herself. Lindsay was unable to foresee at the time that her choice would have permanent repercussions. The sky over Manhattan started to fill with dense clouds of rain as darkness drew near. It was shortly beyond 7 o'clock. A young associate carrying a heavy file came up to Lindsay's desk and said, "M. Baker, please give the final review of this and a contract." "I'm sorry, I can't today." As she said, Lindsay hurriedly stuffed her laptop into her bag. "My son is now with my sister. Tomorrow morning, I'll go over it first thing. But the client wants it done today." "I get it. Please email it to me so I can review it when I get home." Lindsay got to her feet and picked up her coat. She looked at her phone as she entered the elevator. Before leaving for the Analyst of the Year celebration that evening, she had left a message requesting a brief phone conversation. Candace still hadn't responded. It had started to rain lightly when she arrived at the entry foyer. Lindsay checked her phone once more as she opened her umbrella. Michael's reply this time said, "The flight is on schedule. I'll return home early tomorrow. Give Aaron a kiss on my behalf. Do not be concerned." Her footsteps echoed on the wet sidewalk as she ran toward the metro station. The streets were very silent at this hour. Lindsay called Candace once more as she walked briskly. "Please pick up." The ringing was a hollow echo. "I wonder if Aaron is okay." She checked the signal on the other lane by tilting her umbrella slightly as she got closer to a crossing. Everything changed in that moment of distraction. There was a strong hit, a loud crash, and a blinding light. The tires of an automobile skidded on the wet road as it sped from the left. Screaming was out of the question. The body of Lindsay was hurled into the air and into the night. Her son's face flashed in her head as awareness dwindled. Aaron. And then the world went dark. A white ceiling, a disinfected odor, and the constant beeping of machinery. These feelings strengthened gradually as consciousness slowly restored. "Miss Baker, can you hear me?" Her eyes gradually came into focus. A white-coated female doctor gazed down at her worriedly. "You were sent to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital following an accident. For over 2 hours, you have been unconscious." A stab of pain went through her body as she tried to move. Lindsay was having trouble breathing due to discomfort in her chest and abdomen, and her right leg was immobilized in a thick cast. She had bandages on what looked like a lacerated face. "Surgery is required. The results of your blood tests and x-rays have been sent to us. You may be bleeding inside, and you have many fractures. The estimated duration of the procedure is 3 hours. I must have my phone. I need to call my son." Just then, there was a loud shout from the corridor. "Mom, where is Mommy?" Lindsay felt her heart pound. That voice was unmistakable. Quickly, a nurse entered the room. A 5-year-old youngster has approached the front desk. According to him, he is your son, but my sister was meant to. Aaron hurried in as the door flew open, and her voice faded. His tiny body was trembling from the cold. His face was smeared with tears, and he was still in his pajamas with just one shoe on. Mommy. He grabbed Lindsay's hand as he raced to the bedside. His little hand was freezing. I was afraid. Their home was empty. Lindsay felt a cold go through her whole body. Aaron, where's Aunt Candace? He said. Auntie put on a pretty dress and left, in a shaky voice. She left when I was playing in the yard. Since I was unable to reach you on the phone, I decided to visit your office. Anger and anxiety shot through me as soon as I came in. Lindsay Candace had gone to an awards event on a snowy night, leaving a 5-year-old youngster alone at home. Nurse Tiffany phoned the police right away. It is possible that a youngster has been neglected. We urgently want an inquiry. Lindsay gave her kid a firm embrace. Her arm ached sharply from the IV needle. But it didn't matter. She decided then and there that she would never again permit someone to endanger her kid, since all she needed was to feel the warmth of his tiny body. Lindsay held Aaron for the last half hour until the cops showed up, battling different emotions while softly petting her son's hair. Aaron, can you tell me everything from the beginning? She said softly. After Aunt Candace arrived to pick you up, what transpired? Aaron gripped his mother's hospital gown and spoke in a shaky voice. When Auntie arrived to take me up, it was enjoyable at first. She introduced me to a new game in space, but in the evening she started hurrying. She hurriedly changed into a stunning outfit and announced that she had a crucial appointment. Just then the door of the hospital room was knocked on, and 2 policemen came in. My name is Deputy Chief Hansen, Miss Baker. Could I talk to you? Deputy Chief Hansen started asking in a low voice after opening his notepad. Miss Candace Wagner is your sister, correct? Yes, she was supposed to take care of my son tonight because I was working late. Lindsay found it difficult to remain calm. What time did you leave your son with her? 4:00 p.m. He was gonna be picked up straight from daycare by her. After taking a note, Deputy Chief Hansen resumed his inquiries. Did you contact your sister afterward? I made many attempts to call her but was unable to get through. She was meant to be on Wall Street tonight for the Analyst of the Year presentation. At that moment, a second officer came in. His hand clutched a tablet. We've been able to confirm the surveillance footage, he said, time-stamped at 6:15 p.m. The screen displayed the front of Candace's home. Candace was spotted wearing an opulent evening gown as she left the residence. She seemed to be rushing. What about the crucial video? Candace saw Aaron playing in the backyard, and without looking back, climbed into a fancy automobile and drove off. She was unable to say. It was almost frigid outside. Carefully, Deputy Chief Hansen went on. It is obviously dangerous to leave a 5-year-old outside. Leaving a youngster home alone, particularly on a winter night, is blatant child maltreatment. This is a really significant issue. At that moment, loud sounds started coming from outside the hospital room. Where's my daughter, Lindsay? Her mother's voice was heard. The voice of her father came next. Why are the police getting involved? The atmosphere appeared to freeze as Lindsay's parents walked into the hospital room. Her father's face was twisted in rage, and her mother's makeup was smeared. What took place? I've heard that Candace may be taken into custody. When Deputy Chief Hansen described the issue, her mother's voice was panicked. As the explanation went on, Lindsay watched her parents' faces. Her father appeared disbelieving, and her mother's face lost its color. In desperation, her mother said, "This must be some kind of mistake. Candace would never act in that manner. Something must be the cause." A reason. The tone of Lindsay's voice was icy. A reason to leave a 5-year-old alone on a winter night. Her father said, but the awards ceremony was crucial for her career. Her career. Lindsay lost her temper. I was chilly and alone until Aaron came seeking for me. What if there had been an accident involving him? What if someone had taken him? At last, her father said something. Lindsay, please calm down. It's a family issue. The cops don't need to be involved. No, Dad, was Lindsay's stern response. This is illegal. I will take all required legal steps to protect my baby since Candace breached the law. A nurse rushed in at that moment. Please turn on the TV. A news report started playing on the TV. In the hospital room. Breaking news. The analyst of the Year Awards event tonight was severely disrupted. It was found that nominee Candace Weidner had gone to the event alone, leaving her 5-year-old nephew at home. The cops are interviewing people after interrupting the event. On the television, Candace was still wearing her opulent evening gown as the cops carried her away. She put both hands over her face. A thick stillness fell over the room. Aaron shivered a little and hid his face in his mother's breast. Lindsay's determination solidified as she caressed her son's back. There was no turning back. Her son's safety and justice were at stake. This was no longer only a family matter. Following learning of the occurrence, Michael, who had returned from overseas as planned, hurried to the hospital the morning following the surgery. Michael explained the problem and then drove Aaron home. After a lengthy separation, the father and son embraced for a long period. Unbelievable, Michael exclaimed as he returned to the hospital room after putting his kid to bed. I can't believe Candace would do such a thing. Lindsay nodded silently in agreement as she lay in her hospital bed. Her right leg was heavily cast, and even though the agony hadn't completely gone away, she was already thinking about what to do next. A nurse came in for the morning rounds at that very moment. A thick stillness fell over the room. Aaron shivered a little and hid his face in his mother's breast. Lindsay's determination solidified as she caressed her son's back. There was no turning back. Her son's safety and justice were at stake. This was no longer only a family matter. Following learning of the occurrence, Michael, who had returned from overseas as planned, hurried to the hospital the morning following the surgery. Michael explained the problem and then drove Aaron home. After a lengthy separation, the father and son embraced for a long period. Unbelievable, Michael exclaimed as he returned to the hospital room after putting his kid to bed. I can't believe Candace would do such a thing. Lindsay nodded silently in agreement as she lay in her hospital bed. Her right leg was heavily cast, and even though the agony hadn't completely gone away, she was already thinking about what to do next. A nurse came in for the morning rounds at that very moment. Miss Baker, you have a visitor. A woman in a suit stepped through the open door of the hospital room. My name is Kathy Owen. Kathy sat down and stated, I work for Child Protective Services as a social worker. The reason I'm here is the Candace Weidner case. A thorough inquiry has started. Kathy started to explain after opening her file. Security camera footage, weather data, records of your accident, and above all, the fact that Aaron came to the hospital alone. These are all evidence of child neglect. Furthermore, communications between Candace and her closest friend Nicole, who was employed at the same investment business, were discovered on Messenger during the police inquiry. Hey Nicole, what do you think of my speech for tonight's ceremony? The bit about being a female analyst who values family is really excellent. Won't it sell well? I'm now watching my niece. All of this is a part of the performance. You're not really going to take care of him, are you? Obviously not. I'll leave him with the housekeeper after letting him play for a little. It's my night tonight. I can't pass up this chance. Did you arrange for the housekeeper? Oh, I didn't remember. It's too late now. But I told my sister I had made the arrangements. I have to hurry. The child can wait. This is my time. Lindsay was chilled by her sister's calculating behavior as she read these notes. Candace used her son as a prop to advance in her career. But when she neglected to make arrangements for the housekeeper, her plans fell apart. At that moment, the door to the hospital room opened once more. Her parents came in. Her father was completely worn out, and her mother's eyes were puffy from sobbing. Please cover Candace's bail, Lindsay. You can afford it. Otherwise, her life will be wrecked. Lindsay let out a sigh. Her parents worked as regular paid employees. They were pleading with Lindsay to save their daughter even though they couldn't afford Candace's bail, as though Lindsay's savings belonged to them. Are you joking, Mom? Lindsay posed the question icily. Erin's life was put in danger. Her father remarked, but isn't it a family matter? Her mother went on to say, family matters should be settled within the family. Yes, said Lindsay slowly, but what is family, Dad? Do you not believe that Candace's abandonment of my kid was a transgression? Kathy went on to say in a low voice, the prosecution has already made the decision to press charges. Will you testify? Is the inquiry. There was silence in the room. Lindsay was the center of attention. Her mother asked, your sister, are you really going to send your sister, who you grew up with, to prison? Lindsay shut her eyes. Her gaze flashed back to their early years. Yes, there were good times with Candace, but she also remembered the times when her sister was always given priority and her own efforts were not acknowledged. And most importantly, the picture of her youngster frantically looking for his mother on that chilly night. I'm a mother too, Mom. The safety of a child is the most crucial thing. For her career, Candace put the life of a 5-year-old at jeopardy. That cannot be forgiven. However, what would have happened if Erin had been hurt? What if someone had taken him? What if he had died from freezing? The what-ifs that I consider keep me up at night. Michael grasped his spouse's hand. Despite his silence, his face conveyed that he agreed with his wife's choice. You've always pampered Candace by calling her gifted and promising. However, brilliance needs to be accompanied by accountability. Someone who puts their profession before fundamental human values is unforgivable. The file was closed by Kathy. So, will you testify? Yes, Lindsay said in a clear, determined voice. I'll tell everything for the safety of my son and for the safety of other children. Anger made her father's voice waver. Are you satisfied, destroying the family? No, Dad, said Lindsay. The family wasn't ruined by me. It was Candace's self-centered conduct and your years of condoning it. I'm attempting to establish a new kind of family. After sobbing, her mother and father left the room, leaving Kathy, Lindsay, and Michael alone. They started talking about the impending court case. Lindsay felt certain that she had made the proper choice. She needed to follow this road as a mother and as a human, even if it might not be the easiest one. Michael touched her shoulder with his hand. It will be all right. Together, we'll overcome this. Lindsay was thankful for the warmth of his hand and prepared herself for the new life that was starting, a life founded on justice, honesty, and sincere love. At last, she had discovered her calling. The judge delivered the punishment solemnly in a courtroom illuminated by spring sunlight. Candace Widener is hereby sentenced to 2 years in prison for child neglect. Her mother cried out like a scream as Candace fell into her seat. Her father was stunned. The defendant put a 5-year-old youngster in danger by leaving him in a precarious circumstance where he was forced to act alone. The punishment will not be influenced by the defendant's social standing or professional background. The courtroom reverberated with the judge's comments. After 3 months, the trial was finally over. Erin fell asleep on Michael's knee as he gave her a gentle squeeze on the hand. Candace no longer had the glitzy analyst's facade. Her flawless makeup was damaged by tears, and her expensive outfits were swapped out for prison uniforms. A week later, Candace's place of employment, an investment business, collapsed according to the local media. Her complaint prompted an internal inquiry that turned up a number of fraudulent transactions. A fortress constructed on sand had been Candace's stellar career. Her parents were in decline as well. Her father was demoted from a supervisory position in the accounting department to a general staff function, according to a neighbor, since his daughter's situation had a detrimental effect on the company's reputation. His pay was reduced by over 40%. Due to customer complaints, her mother's former coworker said that she was transferred from her position as a supermarket cashier to an early morning cleaning crew. She was also working 2 jobs, starting a part-time job at another store in the afternoon. In addition, the parents had sold the apartment in which they had spent 35 years. The elderly couple's retirement funds were gradually being depleted. In the meantime, Lindsay's new existence was gradually coming into being. Smiles from the family filled the new park slope home. Erin played hard in the large backyard and liked to grow with Michael on the weekends. Lindsay had a stellar reputation at work. Many of her clients trusted her because of her earnest attitude to protecting children's rights. Working parents were overwhelmingly supporting the recently formed Working Parents Support Team. She suddenly ran into her mother at the grocery store one day. Her mother's face looked tired as she searched the bargain aisle. Her mother tried to say Lindsay, but Lindsay simply passed by without saying anything. She could hear her mother crying behind her. She saw her father working as a cleaning staff member at a posh department shop while on another vacation. He was stooped, mopping the floor. He was becoming old. Lindsay instantly looked away so she wouldn't have to make eye contact. Several times, letters had come in from Candace in prison. "I was mistaken, Lindsay. Please pardon me." But Lindsay tossed all those letters in the trash. There should be a distinct boundary established between the past and the present. Neighbors gathered at their new home for a housewarming party. Children's laughter reverberated across the yard, which was filled with the aroma of a barbecue grill. "What a wonderful family," Helen, who lived next door, said. "You all look truly happy." Lindsay grinned back. "Yes, we have everything we need now." Lindsay looked out across the city from the balcony and thought silently as evening descended. Her parents were impoverished in their old age, Candace was incarcerated, and their once luxurious way of life had entirely disappeared. Ironically, she was the only one who had managed to achieve a certain contentment, despite continually being disregarded and viewed as second best. It was a simple but firm contentment, founded on trust and love. "Mommy, look." From the garden, Erin called. He and Michael had created a little vegetable garden, and the first sprouts had appeared. True success is not about ostentatious accomplishments or social status. Lindsay reflected as she saw her son's happy expression. It's about gradually creating a sure happiness with the ones you care about. She kept looking ahead and moving forward, accepting the past as it was. That's the real triumph. Rebecca Stewart is my name. I am 35 years old and employed at a large Wall Street financial business as a senior investment manager. I could appear to be the model of success on the surface. My spouse and 2 kids make up my family, and I reside in a posh condo in Manhattan. William, my spouse, works as an executive for a global construction consulting company. Our 2 kids, Nathan, age 6, and Erica, age 8, go to one of the best private schools in the city. Life hasn't always been easy, though. Over the years, my connection with my family back home in particular has created a complicated shadow. I can still clearly recall that day 17 years ago. I had just been offered a full scholarship to the state's best business school on my last day of high school. I hurried home in excitement to tell my folks the news. I was ready to inform them when everything in my life changed. My parents and my elder sister, Christina, who is 3 years older than me, were sat in the living room. Christina's new loan bill was haphazardly tossed on the table. I held out the acceptance letter and cried, "Mom, Dad, I have fantastic news. I got into Wharton School." My father set down his newspaper, and my mother gently raised her head from her magazine. But there was no happiness in their faces. Rather, the space was filled with a dense air. My father interrupted my mother as she began to speak. He continued, "Rebecca, we need to talk," in a more heated tone than normal. My mother said icily, "Christina is in a bit of trouble. We need to pay off her debts. That is, about your college funds. We had to use them to pay off Christina's debts." The world seemed to stop at that very instant. My sister's incessant debt was paid off with the money my grandmother had left for my education, which was my last hope for the future. I stumbled, but that money was for my education. Grandma promised it to me. Whispering, "Things change," my mother whispered. As a family, it's natural to help those in the most trouble. Christina needs our help now, and that's the priority. Years of unjust treatment erupted in rage at that very moment. I said, the person in the most trouble. Christina made her own mountain of debt. Why should my future be sacrificed? My mother chastised me, saying, Rebecca, Christina is your sister. She's family. Family? Sneered I. Have I ever been treated as part of the family? I'm always in Christina's shadow. My efforts and successes have always been ignored, and now even the chance I finally grasped. Christina was always the one that stood out in our family. Her desires were always given priority. Her mistakes were always overlooked, and now my future was being given up for her. Christina has been the center of our home as I can remember. She was gifted in enthralling audiences, particularly in the performing arts. Christina's skill was the focus of our parents' obsession. In contrast, if Christina had a little part in a school play, the entire family would attend to see it, followed by a celebratory supper at a restaurant. In elementary school, when mother would sneer, "You're good at studying, aren't you?" After I received a perfect grade on an exam, Christina got high-end brands and the newest gaming systems for her birthday, whereas I got useful stationery. The difference became more noticeable as we aged. Christina's vocal training and dancing activities caused constant financial burden on our family. However, our parents thought Christina had the makings of a star, so when I requested money for a scientific club trip, they said, let's cut back on luxuries. In the future, she will provide happiness to the entire family. Despite her low grades and popularity as a cheerleader in high school, Christina's parents encouraged her to pursue a career in the performing arts by paying for her to take classes at a prestigious talent agency. In the meantime, our parents never went to any school functions, even though I was an honor student and the president of the student council in middle school. The distorted ideals of our parents were the cause of this unfair treatment. Both were slightly disappointed by my consistent accomplishments since they were captivated by dazzling skill. 3 years ago, just after graduating from high school, Christina started accruing debt. First, a scammer impersonating a well-known talent agency defrauded her of $10,000. Knowing this, my grandmother volunteered to help pay for my schooling. My parents paid for this by taking money out of my college account, arguing that it was a good experience. Subsequently, it was discovered that Christina had spent $2,000 on entertainment instead of for technical school costs. In order to settle the loan this time, my parents took money out of my preparatory education. We should forgive mistakes made in youth, they said in defense of her once more. Christina accrued $5,000 in debt from many credit cards 2 years ago. After failing an audition, she was upset and turned to shopping as a way to cope. This time, my parents used the money from the house remodeling to pay off the debt, expressing sympathy and saying, "Poor thing." Furthermore, Christina had been a victim of a marriage fraud, accruing further debt and even using the money my grandmother had provided for my studies. During Christina's incessant indebtedness, my money was misappropriated and my aspirations were delayed. My parents believed all of her justifications and wrote off her careless behavior as a result of her immaturity. I left home that evening after packing a backpack with the barest necessities and a few clothing. My paternal grandma Barbara's home was my sole haven. She seems to have anticipated my arrival at the door. She just gave me her typical serene grin and embraced me without asking anything. "Let's make some tea," she asserted. She told my parents the real reason she had given them the money for my schooling that evening. She had faith in my ability and willpower. But her motives were totally exposed by my parents. "But don't worry," she replied while embracing me. "I have other savings. You don't have to give up on your dreams." Her encouragement allowed me to attend college. She covered my living expenses in addition to my tuition. I agreed to keep up my good marks while working part-time in exchange. I only made one trip close to my family's house over the winter break of my freshman year of college. I could make out the Christmas decorations in the brightly lighted windows in the distance. Christina's new automobile was parked, and I could hear laughter. Although it was a traumatic experience, it strengthened my will to find happiness on my own terms. Life in university was not simple. I went to school throughout the day, worked at a cafe in the early mornings, and spent the evenings studying at the library. There were internships to obtain real-world experience, filling the weekends, but my efforts were rewarded, as a big investment business extended an opportunity to me once I graduated. I attempted to pay Grandma back as soon as I graduated, but she adamantly refused. Her words, "That was an investment in you. You graduated with excellent grades, just as you promised. You don't have to give me anything else." In the years that followed, my career developed without incident. I became the youngest manager in my department at the age of 25. William and I met during an investment project conference. He worked for the other firm there as a construction consultant. He honestly and properly answered my incisive questions throughout the lecture. He came up to me after the meeting. He said, "That was an excellent analysis." I was pleased by his direct approach. We went on our first date to a little Manhattan Italian restaurant. He discussed his career and his love of design, particularly his involvement with infrastructure projects in underdeveloped nations. I talked a little about my family that evening. He listened and then remarked, "We can't change the past, but we can create our future." With coffee on days off, supper after overtime, and weekend museum visits, we progressively became closer following that night. Spending time with him opened my eyes. We were married a year later. It was a modest yet touching wedding. Grandma was there, so even though it was straightforward, it was ideal for me. My sister and dad did receive invites, but they did not reply. "I'm proud of your choices," Grandma added, giving me a hug following the procedure. "This is the beginning of your new family." When our daughter Erica was born a year later, Grandma went to the hospital every day. After 2 years, it was the same when Nathan was born. She was the only one who truly understood the joys and challenges of being a parent. My career progressed smoothly even after I gave baby. I bought a fancy apartment in Manhattan at the age of 35 and rose to the position of senior manager. Like me, Erica, who is now 8 years old, grew up to be a smart and industrious youngster. 6-year-old Nathan adopted William's gregarious and amiable demeanor. Despite our busy work and parenting schedules, we spend time together as a family at the dinner table at night. I value these ordinary moments of joy beyond anything else. In the meanwhile, I had lost all contact with my sister and dad. A few times a year, Grandma would occasionally get in touch with my parents. She would occasionally update me on their most recent news, but I didn't get in touch with her again. Deep inside my heart, the breakup with my family had become a locked history. Sometimes, in the midst of the bustle of everyday life, a slight ache would be evoked by seeing moms and daughters shopping together around the holidays or hearing coworkers discuss their family homes. William was aware of my background but kept it to himself. But he would quietly check on me during family-oriented holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving. Every weekend, Grandma came to see us, and the kids loved hearing about her childhood travels across the world. Those were some of the kids' favorite stories. But one day, with Thanksgiving only 2 weeks away, our peace was upended by a phone call. Grandma said, "Rebecca, there's something I need to tell you," with her customary warmth but also a hint of urgency. I said, "What's wrong?" "Your parents and Christina have contacted me. They want to come to my house for Thanksgiving this year." For a second, my heart appeared to stop. I hadn't seen my sister and dad in 17 years. My hands started to shake at the notion. I questioned in a trembling voice, "Do they know I'll be there?" "Yes," Barbara said in a low voice. "Actually, they've asked to see you." There was a lengthy pause before I let out a loud sigh. "All right, I'll think about it." I told William about it that night. "I'll support whatever decision you make, but don't force yourself," he added, holding my hand. "Thank you, I'll think it over a bit more," I responded. However, I had trouble sleeping that night. As William slept peacefully next to me, I was overcome with flashbacks to 17 years ago. I'd ultimately made the decision to go. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe I wanted to stop years of misery and rage. I informed the kids that they would be getting to know new relatives. Though she didn't ask any questions, Erica appeared to realize that this visit meant more than just a normal family get-together. We went to Grandma's place for Thanksgiving. I didn't realize how drastically this choice would alter my life. There was a strange tension in the morning drive to her house. The kids were quieter than normal in the back seat, and William looked at me every now and again as he drove. My parents' vehicle was already parked outside when we got there. 17 years flitted back to me as I saw them standing at the entrance. My mother's back was a little bent, and my father's hair had gone white. Christina had the same appearance, but she appeared exhausted and had bags under her eyes. "Rebecca," my mother said in a shaky voice, "it's been a long time." I firmly said, "Yes, it has." There was an uneasy quiet. There would have likely been even more stillness if Grandma hadn't shown there with her famous pumpkin pie. She introduced the kids to diffuse the situation. Despite Christina's obvious restlessness, my parents were unable to conceal their happiness at seeing their grandkids. The dinner went more smoothly than anticipated. The children, their school activities, interests, and aspirations for the future dominated the talk. My parents talked about their retirement, while Christina talked about her divorce. At least there were no confrontations, even though the discourse was shallow. I watched my parents as they were eating. My father's hands began to shake, something they had never done before. I was also drawn to my mother's cough. Then I saw they were older. Slowly, the topic of discussion shifted to the inevitable. My mother abruptly said, "Rebecca, I want to apologize for that time. We were wrong about using your education funds. We almost ruined your life. I'm truly sorry," my father said, nodding. I had been anticipating these remarks, but I was unsure of how to respond. Something broke inside of me as I heard them. My years-long anguish and rage appeared to gradually fade. "I need some time to think," was the only response I could come up with. After that, things gradually started to get better between my family and us. Every month, we got together for dinner, and sometimes we called. We looked like a typical family on the surface. But soon after, another issue arose. More repairs were required for my folks' crumbling home. After her divorce, Christina eventually moved back home and was making ends meet with part-time job. I initially began lending them modest sums of money for repairs. Over time, it developed into a monthly living expenditure support program. It wasn't much of a strain, given my financial security. I made the decision to provide for my family and started sending $11,000 a month. I also made sure our kids came over on a frequent basis. But one day, after more than 6 months of this pattern, Grandma gave me some startling news. "Rebecca, you are being deceived," she said with regret. "They are laughing at you behind your back, saying, 'Let her milk her for all she's worth. She's rich after all.'" My heart was chilled by those words. When I arrived home, I spoke with William about this. He was occupied with getting ready for a 3-month assignment that would take place abroad. "Why did you test them to see their true colors?" he said after hearing. That evening, we spoke for a while. The Manhattan nightscape served as the background for our chat, while Erica and Nathan had already gone to bed. William remarked, "But I'm worried about the kids," with caution. "Is it okay to involve them in such a plan?" "Indeed," I said, echoing their worries. However, I believed that if we didn't resolve this issue, it would somehow affect our children in another way. "I'll explain to them that they will be spending a short time at Grandma's house," I decided. His expression was worried. "You really are going overseas, so we should use that as part of our plan," he continued. "Okay, but promise me if things get worse, we will stop the plan immediately." The strategy was established when I nodded. I chose to make up a divorce narrative using William's foreign assignment. The idea was to take the kids and ask my parents for assistance. I took the children to my parents' place on the day we carried out the plan. I purposefully applied very little makeup, made bags appear under my eyes, and gave the impression that I hadn't slept properly in days. We explained to our kids that this was only a small gesture connected to Daddy's employment abroad. We purposefully wore outdated clothing and carried 2 luggage as we waited at my parents' front door at nightfall. I inhaled deeply before ringing the bell. The door was opened by my mother. "What are you doing here at this hour, Rebecca?" To make my charade seem plausible, I conjured up actual tears. "Mom, I whispered, quivering as I put my arms over the kids' shoulders. My father and Christina were watching TV in the living room, obviously irritated by our presence. I gave the kids permission to play in a different room. "William and I are getting a divorce," I broke down. "He cheated." After a moment of disbelief, my mother and Christina exchanged profound looks. My dad didn't even raise his head from his paper. We must thus remain here for some time. The room was very cold. "Oh, so it's the snobby little sister's reckoning day. There's no extra room in this house," my mother said icily. Christina scoffed. "But consider the kids. Without your wealthy hubby, what would you be worth?" Christina got to her feet. "After all these years of demeaning us, you now go to your parents' place whenever things get out of hand. Keep me from laughing. Wasn't all of the assistance you previously provided us with simply you showing off your accomplishments?" Acting like a success, my mother joined in and gave us a pitying look. At last, my dad raised his head from his newspaper and gave me a chilly look. "Get out," he said. Grandma's remarks were validated at that very time. They had been taking advantage of me, so they weren't pleased to see me. The financial rewards were a determining factor in their relationship. Even though the anguish from 17 years ago returned in a different form, I was able to manage it this time. "Okay," I muttered. "This is the end of it all." I led the kids to a different room, took their hands, and made my way to the door. As soon as we arrived home, I set to work on the required steps. I canceled the payments for the repairs and halted the monthly disbursements. One by one came cries of rage from Christina and my parents. During the initial days, my cell phone rang nonstop. Over time, the messages' substance intensified and finally included threats. I didn't reply to any of them, though. I chose to engage a lawyer and pursue legal action instead. Consequently, a judge imposed a restraining order that forbade my parents and Christina from contacting me, forced them to pay damages, and ordered them to restore the whole sum of the school trust fund. This time, unlike 17 years before, I made the decision to cut off all contact with my family. It was evidence of my personal development as well. I went over to Barbara's place the next weekend. It was as if she already knew what was going on. There were cookies for the kids and my favorite pie, lemon pie, on the table. Silently, "Your mother came by," she murmured. I let out a gasp. "What did she?" "Grandma went on. She wanted to see you. But I turned her away because she's supposed to be banned from contacting you," while pouring the tea. "She brought some pictures of you when you were younger. She attempted to evoke strong feelings in you by displaying sentimental recollections." I couldn't resist grinning aridly. As usual, my mother used emotional appeals and guilt-inducing techniques, but I was no longer susceptible to their strategies. Grandma had seen everything. When she informed me, "You made the right decision. I've decided as well. Your parents won't get anything from me. I've made the decision to give my estate to a worthy cause. I have a different outlook on life now. I've discovered that family is not always defined by blood, and that sometimes the family you select might actually be your family." A moment later, Grandma took a big step. She moved into an assisted living facility after selling her home. "I've spent enough time in this house," she remarked. "I want to create new memories in a new location." We went through the things that brought back memories of the house as we got ready to relocate. An old album came out, and below my grin was a picture of myself on my high school graduation day. Grandma appeared to be proud. She held out the picture and asked, "Do you remember? That day you chose your future, and now you've built a wonderful life." Nathan and Erica were thrilled on the day of Grandma's relocation. They took pleasure in having hot chocolate at a local cafe, which became their new indulgence, and assisted in decorating her new room. My sisters and dad, meantime, appeared to be having difficulties. They believed they could always count on me for financial assistance, so they considered the $1,000 I have been giving them each month as a legitimate source of income to fund their opulent lifestyle. My parents had invested in stocks and wasted their retirement money. Barbara informed me of their circumstances 3 months after I stopped providing financial help. Their resources were being strained not just by their initial indebtedness, but also by the return of the education money and the damages. The debt collectors for Christina's debts were getting more aggressive, and collection notices started showing up at my parents' house. I was informed that my father lost a substantial sum of money and began making progressively riskier bets in an attempt to recover his losses. Christina had accrued additional debt after falling for a new scammer who was acting as a producer. She grew reliant on tranquilizers after being driven to a breakdown. Due to unpaid energy bills, my parents were forced to sell their home, turn off their electricity, and were no longer able to maintain their property. They eventually rented a modest apartment in a little town in the country. My mother started out as a grocery cashier, while my father started out as a part-time security guard. I heard rumors that Christina was relocating to another friend's flat in order to avoid debt collectors. However, this was the outcome of their own behavior. They overused other people's generosity for their own luxuries, taking it for granted. "What goes around comes around," silently muttered Grandma. However, you made the correct decision. They will constantly have to rely on other people to survive. Barbara is currently residing in the assisted living facility in a comfortable manner. I take the kids to see her on the weekends, and we've made it a habit to spend time in the facility's garden. Nathan likes to play chess with the other residents, and Erica joined the facility's gardening group. After returning from his abroad assignment, William wholeheartedly agreed with my choice. His words, "You made the right choice," came as he embraced me. "You are freed from a debt you never owed." Our relationship has never been stronger. His assistance, in my opinion, was essential to conquering this obstacle. Sometimes in life, one must make difficult decisions, but if such decisions are grounded in one's own truth, I think they will always lead to the correct course.